Welcome to Counseling Conversations with Lone Star College Online, where we are dedicated to giving students the tools they need to maximize their potential and reach their goals. When students feel their best, they do their best. So let's talk. I'm Tamara Harrod, and today we're going to be talking about suicide prevention and awareness. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for adults ages 20 to 34, according to the CDC. Today, we want to provide practical advice that can empower our college students to support their mental health, get the help they need when they need it, and learn how to support friends and family who may be experiencing suicidal thoughts. Here with me today is Cicely Williams. She is a counselor and our manager of accessibility services and resources here at Lone Star College. Welcome, Cicely.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Before we get started, tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey to Lone Star College.
Absolutely. So I started out my higher ed journey running the counseling department at one of my previous colleges. I am a licensed counseling supervisor. So essentially what that means is any type of service you would receive at a private practice, from a community agency, I hold the same licensure, and I also assist therapists who are trying to become licensed. I help them get licensed. And so that's kind of what started my journey to running the counseling center at one of the previous colleges that I worked at. And then from there, I went on to open up a private practice. And currently, right now, I don't do any counseling in higher ed, but my journey with counseling led me to disability services. And so I currently work within that disability services field within higher ed.
That's wonderful. Well, we are definitely glad that you are here with us at Lone Star College and that you have so much information about suicide prevention that you can offer us. So let's get started by asking, what are some of the challenges and stressors that college students face that make them more vulnerable to mental health issues and suicidal ideation? And how can students cope with these extra challenges that they're faced with?
So I think what we're seeing now is there's an increase of people who are able to attend higher education who have mental health barriers. So in the past, if you had, let's say, a mental health barrier or maybe a mental health diagnosis, that would oftentimes hinder your ability to move on into a higher ed situation. And so now, because we do have better healthcare, mental health is on the forefront, and there's just a lot more availability to services, we're seeing more people being able to go to college, which is amazing. But with that becomes added stressors. So if I've been someone who's always struggled with, say, depression and anxiety, now I'm going into a new environment with new stressors, new, let's say, triggers that may trigger my condition and make it worse. That's a really big factor. Also, there's expectations now for college students that weren't previously there, right? There's deadlines are different. They have maybe first time away from home. They may be feeling isolated from their family. They may not be able to connect well with their peers. It's also really stressful to know that you have 7 assignments due in 7 different classes with little to no sleep. If we factor in a lot of our students maybe having to work, or maybe non-traditional students, there's going to be those other factors as well. And so there's just a lot of different things that students are dealing with right now that previously in the past just wasn't a factor. When it comes to coping, I would say one of the biggest pieces is you have to be mindful of how you feel. So I think oftentimes we tell people to just push through. Oh, if you're feeling anxious, just push through. It'll get better. Or if you're feeling depressed, just let it go. It'll be okay. That's not true, right? And so the best way that we can cope is talking to others around us, maybe reaching out and seeking an on-campus counselor. I know at LSC we have a great amount. So we have LSC counselors, and then we also have CIS counselors. And so really reaching out to get help from other people is one of the best ways to cope. And then also, of course, self-care. I know we hear that all of the time, but self-care is paramount. So that could be anything in terms of putting your textbook down for 5 minutes and taking a walk. It could be taking maybe 3 minutes longer in the shower just to sit and just relax and focus. It could be calling and reaching out to a friend. So there's lots of different things that the students can do to cope.
Absolutely. Yes. So stay connected with friends and
Absolutely.
family, prioritize self-care.
Hmm.
These are excellent coping strategies for our students that are juggling so much,
Right.
family, work, college. So what advice do you have for students who are hesitant to seek help?
Just go. And I know that sounds so simple, but I know it's incredibly hard to do that. But once you get over the fear of that first step, just go, because there's going to be someone on the other side who's going to have an unbiased, non-judgmental, open ear for you. And so I know that there's a lot of negative stereotypes. There could be stigma related to going to seek a counselor or going to therapy, but I just want you to put that aside and I want you to try it. Because the worst that could happen is, okay, you don't like your counselor, go get another one, and get another one until you find someone who is your fit, who you can talk to, because that's going to be the person who's going to be your go-to to teach you how to overcome these obstacles, who's going to be your biggest cheerleader, and more importantly, who's not going to judge you and can understand the path that you're on.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're feeling overwhelmed, seek help early. Early intervention is crucial for better outcomes. And here at Lone Star College, there's so many people that are ready to help you and want to help you given that opportunity. So reach out to anyone here at Lone Star College and we'll get you to the right place and connected with a counselor if needed.
Exactly.
So, what are the key warning signs of suicidal ideation?
Okay. So with suicidal ideations, it's going to oftentimes, it comes hand in hand with depression and anxiety. So the warning signs are going to be mixed in between those things. So one of the biggest pieces that we'll notice is that you are probably feeling depressed. So there's going to be feelings of hopelessness. There's going to be feelings of helplessness. There's going to be feelings of kind of that doom and gloom. So you may not even be able to pinpoint why you feel the way you feel, but it's just kind of this sinking feeling inside that you cannot get rid of. You may notice that your friends, your family, or yourself might be isolating, so you don't want to hang out with everybody as much as you used to. You may be ignoring phone calls. You may be ignoring your text messages, just not responding because you just don't have the energy to do that. You may also notice that you don't do the things that you used to. So let's say you loved basketball and now the thought of doing something like that is just really exhausting. Everything feels very overwhelming. You feel like, okay, I just can't handle life right now. So those are some of the signs and symptoms of depression. And so when we talk about signs and symptoms of anxiety, it's going to be not wanting to be around people, feeling restless, feeling overwhelmed by your task. And so when we look at all of that, oftentimes when suicidal ideation comes into play is when you feel like, I can't handle this anymore. There is nothing that's going to bring me relief but death. I just don't want to wake up in the morning. I just don't want to live. I just don't want to deal with what life has for me. And so oftentimes we notice those thoughts are reoccurring. That's suicidal ideations. And so oftentimes when people think about suicidal ideations, we think it's kind of like this big thing of, oh, I just want to, A, B, and C. That's not necessarily what it is. Oftentimes it's a fleeting thought. I don't want to be here anymore. Or a fleeting thought of life would be better if I wasn't here anymore. Or people would have a better life if I wasn't around. Those, in fact, are suicidal ideations as well. So we want to be mindful of that. Oftentimes people have a fleeting thought of, oh, if I just took this pill, then I won't have to feel this pain anymore. So all of those are warning signs of suicidal ideation, and your depression and anxiety can lead to that suicidal ideation. Or if you're someone who may be dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, often those symptoms as well can lead to suicidal ideations. And so it can be tricky because sometimes it's not as blatant as we would expect. Sometimes those thoughts are fleeting and they're quick. And so we don't pay attention to them and we just kind of brush it off as, oh, I'm just having a bad day. But if you are having those thoughts, I want you to stop and take some time and talk to someone about it, because we want to make sure we catch it before it becomes too overwhelming or it feels bigger than you, or you start to consider it as a viable option. So those are things we want to be mindful of.
Yes, absolutely. When you see these warning signs in yourself or someone that you may know, what specific steps should you take?
So the first thing I would always tell people is to reach out and communicate with the person that you trust. They may not have the right things to say. So I will prep you ahead of time and say that. And it may be an uncomfortable conversation, but at least you're getting the ball rolling on that conversation. And if you tell some person and they brush it off and they don't really take you seriously, I want you to reach out and talk to someone else. I want you to continue to tell someone until someone really listens to you and hears you. And so oftentimes that is going to be the counselor on campus. So let's say we tell our best friend is super overwhelmed about it, and they're like, I don't know how to handle that. That's okay. I want you to go talk to a counselor on campus. Just because you tell someone you're feeling like killing yourself doesn't mean we're going to take you to the hospital and admit you. It means we're going to start having a conversation with you on how do we get you past this moment? What are some of the tools and techniques that we can use to get you feeling better? What are some precautions we can put in place so that you don't follow through with your thought process? And so when you talk about what's going on and you reach out to people around you, that can start the process of healing. The worst thing you can do is keep it to yourself and deal with intrusive thoughts of suicide on your own, because then we can't help you on your journey to healing, and we can't stop those thoughts if we don't know they're happening.
Absolutely. Good advice. What support services should college students be aware of if they or someone they know is experiencing mental health difficulties or those thoughts of suicide?
Absolutely. So one of the things there are so many crisis lines that are available. So if you have a pen and paper handy while you're watching this, I'm going to pull my numbers because I want you guys to take this down. So let's say, for example, you are having these suicidal thoughts after hours. So you can't go to your school counselor, because remember, if you're on campus during the day, that's going to be the first place I want you to go to. I want you to identify where the counseling department is, because we have one on every single one of our LSC campuses, and go talk to a counselor. There are crisis counselors on the majority of our campus, and if not, we do have just our regular CIS or LSC counselors. If it's after hours, though, I want you to take this number down. So the first one is going to be our prevention lifeline, and all you have to do is dial 988. That's it. 988, hit the call button, and you're immediately going to be connected with an emergency counselor. The other line is called crisis text line. And all you have to do is text the word home to 741-741. And that's going to be 24-hour support. So if you text somebody, it could be at 3 a.m. in the morning, someone's going to text you right back. And if you prefer, they also have a line through the WhatsApp, and you can connect with them through the WhatsApp. So that's another way. And all you have to do is go to, like I said, text 741 to 741, text home, and someone's going to be there to talk to you no matter what time. And then the last number I want you guys to write down is called the Trevor Project. And that's a crisis and suicide intervention for LGBTQ plus students. And what you can do is you text the word START to 678 678. And someone's going to be right there to respond to you as well. So I always like to give these three numbers out, because that means someone can always be there to support you if necessary. So that's always a great way for you to connect. Find someone who can assist you through your moment of crisis or through your moment of need, or if you just even want to talk. So if you're just like, I don't feel like killing myself, but I don't feel like myself. I don't feel good. I don't feel well, and I need to talk to someone. You can reach out with those three numbers and connect with someone on the other line if you're not able to get there during the day.
Yes, there is a crisis counselor waiting for you on the other end of those lines. So use them if you need them. And if you or someone you know is in immediate danger, call 911.
Absolutely.
Are there any myths or misconceptions about suicide?
Absolutely. So, the first myth I want to talk about is when people decide to say that suicide is a selfish act, because that's not what it is at all. We really need to start changing our perspective on how we view suicide, which is a big reason of why we're doing this talk today, because to imply that it's something that was selfish is to kind of negate everything that that person was going through, right? So we're talking about someone who was in so much pain and who felt so overwhelmed with life that they felt like the only option that they had was to take their life. And so that's not something that's selfish. We have to really dive into and look at the person as a whole and recognize that they felt like this was their only option. It's easy to judge someone from the outside looking in if we're not walking in their shoes. And so we do have to be mindful of that. And speaking of that, another, I guess, misconception or just something for us to be mindful of is how we talk about suicide. So, oftentimes in our normal everyday to day life, when we talk about suicide, we'll say, oh, well, that person committed suicide. In our community, we're trying to change that because oftentimes when we say someone committed suicide, it's kind of likened to a crime, right? That person committed a crime or they, committed burglary. And so what we want to do is we want to separate that. We want to take the stigma away from it because what that does is it's going to allow us to start to have conversations about suicide without that negative stigma attached. So if you know someone who took their life by suicide, we want to say that person died by suicide instead of saying that they committed suicide. Because what that does, it opens the door for less stigma and more conversation. So, another common myth about suicide is that if you know someone who is experiencing suicidal ideations, that if you ask them, it'll make them go and die by suicide. And that's not true. So if you have someone in your family or your life and you feel like they may be experiencing suicidal ideations, ask them. It's okay. It's not going to push them over the edge or make them want to go out and die by suicide. It's actually going to start a conversation, a needed conversation. And so it's okay. For the longest time, the myth was, oh, if you ask them, you're going to put the thought in their head. Or if they're just depressed and they weren't thinking about it, if I ask them, that's going to make them now think about it. No, that's not true. It opens the door, it releases the stigma, and it starts the flow of conversation. When you ask them, you don't want to beat around the bush. You don't want to say things like, "Oh, do you think you think about hurting yourself? Do you think you want to take your life?" No, we're going to be open and say, "Are you thinking about killing yourself?" Because oftentimes what that does, it opens the door once again to have that conversation. Can it be a little bit uncomfortable? Possibly, but you could potentially save a life by asking that question.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of programs that can help you start that conversation. So there is a program called Seize the Awkward. If you just put it in your Google search bar, it pops up. It's an entire website that is dedicated to teaching you how to have that conversation with a friend or a loved one who may be thinking about taking their life. So I would say those are probably the I would say the biggest misconceptions. Not asking the question because you feel like it's going to make the person want to do that, assuming that suicide is a selfish act when it's not, and then assuming that we should continue to say the person committed suicide. So those are probably some of the biggest ones.
Mm-hmm.
Another one would probably be that the person isn't thinking about anyone else but themselves, which also ties into that selfish rhetoric, which is not true because oftentimes they're assuming life will be better if I'm not around. People won't have to worry about me anymore. I won't be a burden on my family anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually not a selfish act, but it's something that we do want to prevent 100% because you matter. Everybody matters. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing I hope people pull from our videos, that this is doesn't have to be your option. There's so many other options we could do to help you along this journey.
Absolutely. And that's such a wonderful message. And all those misconceptions. It's important to get that message out to reduce the stigma. Let's talk about suicide. If you see someone struggling, ask them directly. These are very important things because, yes, you can save a life. In your opinion, what is the most important message or takeaway for college students regarding suicide prevention?
So I would say one of the most important takeaways is that this is happening frequently and it is 100% preventable.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say it's happening frequently, I believe it's one person every 11 minutes who dies by suicide. And this is something that we can prevent. We can get in front of this. This doesn't have to be our reality. Your age group doesn't have to have suicide as the second leading cause of death. We can, by starting conversations, by bringing more awareness to this topic, we can prevent this from happening. Your voice, your support, it matters so much. If you see a random stranger walking along the street and you notice that they seem upset or sad, ask them, hey, are you okay? How's your day going? And you'd be surprised how that one interaction could have saved someone's life. So oftentimes when before I started working in higher ed, I did a lot of crisis counseling. So I would be one of the first people who would come out when someone attempted to take their life. And so when I would meet with them, I would talk with them and, just kind of have that moment to really sit with them. Let them know I see you, you're here. Tell me what happened leading up to this event so we can figure out how to get you back to yourself, how to get you back to your starting point, to your baseline. And oftentimes, and I would say over a course of 3 years of doing this work, I heard one main theme. The day I decided to take my life, I walked around and I tried to see if anyone noticed me, and no one said hi to me. No one even looked at me. No one spoke to me. No one said anything. And how many people took that as confirmation that them not being here on this earth didn't matter and that they could follow through with their suicide? That was overwhelmingly the same thing I heard over and over again. And so I'm going to challenge everyone who watches this video to start to take that into consideration. If you see someone, a simple hello, a simple eye contact hello, a simple how are you doing today? Even if you're like, I don't feel like talking to all these people, that one hello, that one acknowledgement can change someone's life. And that's such a big deal. If you ever have time, I want you all to take a moment to look up Kevin Hines. He is a Golden Gate survivor. So he jumped off of the Golden Gate Bridge and he goes all around the country and he talks about his experience and he talks about what led up to the day that he decided to die by suicide and then what happened the moment his hands left the rail off the Golden Gate Bridge, all the thoughts that happened, and then his recovery from that point on. And I think that you will be a changed individual after you watch that because it is so profound to hear the thoughts that went through his mind, kind of the instant moment he let go, thinking, oh, I don't want this to be my legacy. I don't want people to remember me by this. And then kind of that thought process following afterwards, kind of nobody talked to him. He didn't think he mattered. His mental health had gotten so overwhelming that he couldn't see through the clouds. He couldn't see through the fog. And so he really talks in depth about how sometimes we become jaded with life and we become overwhelmed by life. And oftentimes suicide feels like our only way out. And that's not the truth. There's so many things that you haven't done yet with your life. There's so many people that you haven't affected with your joy and your warmth and your love. And you cannot let your depression or your anxiety or your trauma become everything to you because you are so much more than that. And we need you here in this world and we need you here every day and you matter so much. And so I guess for the students, I would say I want you to take, if you are someone who's dealing with suicide right now, or you know someone who is currently dealing with suicide, we love you. Everybody around you loves you. Even if you can't see it right now, one day you will. And so I just need you to go reach out and talk to someone. I need you to connect with people who are on their healing journey. And I really want you to go watch that movie or any YouTube clip from Kevin Hines and see his healing journey. Because one of the things he talks about is that your journey isn't going to be easy. That's something that's not guaranteed. Our journey of healing and health, it's going to be filled with bumps and roadblocks and barriers, but it's worth it because you will find peace and life and joy and happiness. You just have to hang in there. I believe I answered most of your questions. Did I answer that correctly?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm certainly going to look him up because I'm sure he has such a powerful message to give. And
Absolutely.
this is such a hard topic, Cicely, to talk about, but we need to get that message out. And I'm so thankful that you came to discuss this very important topic with me today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. If you are struggling and if you would like to discuss this topic or other topics more in depth, please make a counseling appointment and let's talk.